John McCain said in his concession speech to Barack Obama in 2008, "A century ago, President Theodore Roosevelt's invitation of Booker T. Washington to dine at the White House was taken as an outrage in many quarters. But America today is far from that cruel and prideful bigotry of the time. There is no better evidence of this than the election of an African American to the presidency of the United States. The election of Barack Obama certainly was a milestone that has shaped American history. But so was the day that shocked the nation on October 16, 1901, the day that the first ever African American was invited to dine at the White House. First, we'll whisk up the historical context behind this monumental event. Then, we'll eat up the dinner itself. And finally, we'll serve up the reactions and aftermath. By 1901, the post-Civil War era had ended, and so did any attempt towards Reconstruction. Instead, there was segregation, Jim Crow laws, and a deep political turmoil between the regions of the United States. And in the midst of it all stood two men, Booker T. Washington and Teddy Roosevelt. Washington, a former slave, a leader, and an educator, was well respected by everyone, even by Southerners who appreciated his more accommodationist views. But Teddy Roosevelt, for many Southerners, was seen as too radical. With Washington's Southern roots, Roosevelt often sought advice, especially on judicial appointments that might appeal to the South. So it was no surprise when Roosevelt asked for a meeting with Washington. But on an impulse, Roosevelt changed what was supposed to be a meeting into a dinner. Now, while many other African Americans had been invited to the White House, none had been invited to dine. And Washington was no stranger to this. He knew the magnitude of the dinner and the potential effects it could have towards equality. And Roosevelt even hesitated after giving the invitation, fearing the response it could get. According to HuffPost, the dinner consisted of both men, Roosevelt's family, and some of his closest friends. And apparently, the men even talked politics over coffee. But this dinner had far bigger implications than just dinner. For Southerners, dinner is the highest form of courtesy, and anyone you bring to your dinner table is considered to be your equal. There was also this idea that if one man were to invite another man to his dinner table, he then had the capacity to woo his daughter. Southern newspapers everywhere were blatantly racist, saying, "We won't stand for this miscegenation and social equality." Some Southerners even tried to tell themselves that it wasn't dinner, but lunch. The African American response was more mixed. In many cases, it provoked fear. The Missouri Centennial, just a couple days after this dinner, published a South Carolinian senator saying that African Americans are going to have to be killed in order to learn their place. And just a few weeks after the dinner, 34 lives were taken in race riots that broke out in the New Orleans area. A hit was even put onto Washington. But in some cases, African Americans felt empowered. Just 2 days after the dinner, according to NPR, 2 Black women sat front row in their white church. The North was also more supportive of their president, saying, "You can invite whomever you want." But nonetheless, Roosevelt was criticized in ways that presidents haven't ever been criticized before. And Washington was not invited to dine again, and nor was another African American for nearly 30 years. Looking back at the reactions that we saw in 1901, they're frightening. And although we've made progress, like Senator McCain mentioned, we are not a country without cruel and prideful bigotry. According to the NAACP, African Americans are incarcerated at 5 times the rate than their white counterparts. And African American students are 3.5 times more likely to be suspended or expelled. Just because we have made progress in society doesn't mean that we can become complacent towards race issues. The fight towards equality is not over. There are far more milestones that need to come.